Well, I am going to start, or within my presentation, most likely demonstrate the skill that I might bring to this table that is not so known and is the only way I can proceed. When I thought of planning this as a presentation, and I got so anxious, and I wrote all these notes, and then I thought, oh, I'd have to see how long this takes, and it was like, no, I am not doing that. So I'm going to use Eugene Gendlin's focusing process, experiential focusing, to trust that my body knowing, and I'll gesture here in the center of my body, that my bodily felt sense of this whole topic will know what I need to say. So rather than looking at my list, I'm just going to trust that it will come up inside. And I will close my eyes, which is not so marketable, I'll say, in this culture. And then I'll try to speak from my felt sense, and I'll open my eyes too. So I'm going to stop and just sense into my contribution to a curriculum on empathy and self-compassion, or on compassion, let's say. So I had this little rubric about like who, what, and why, something like that. And it reminds me to say who I am. I'm Dr. Kathy McGuire. I studied with Dr. Eugene Gendlin back in the 1970s, and he had collaborated with Carl Rogers, the so-called creator of empathic listening. And so I have been doing this work since the 1970s. Carl Rogers and Eugene Gendlin did a big research project trying to prove Rogers' 3 conditions for successful psychotherapy: empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. And instead, what they discovered is that it was a skill that clients brought into therapy that determined which clients would succeed in therapy. It was not empathy alone. It was the client being able to pay attention to their ongoing felt experiencing during therapy sessions that was the real motor for change. And there's a research measure that came out of that called the experiencing scale. So there is some evidence basis that this, what Gendlin then went on to call focusing, is a basic component to successful personality change. So Gendlin went on and developed it as a self-help technique called focusing. And along with that, we were developing it in a context called a changes group, which was a self-help peer counseling group, or community, I would say, that grew out of everything that was happening in the late 1960s, 1970s. So while Gendlin went on to create the Focusing Institute, my heart always lay in the peer counseling community, where people learn to exchange listening, focusing terms. So the speaker does focusing, and this, I think, is in addition to what happens in empathy circles. And I think that it is this focusing component in the speaker that allows a deepening of what happens in these exchanges. There's the focuser, and then the other person is doing basically empathic listening with some focusing suggestions included. But I think it's this focusing component that allows people to speak from a deeper level that might come up in a typical empathy circle, although I know there have been very deep empathy circles as well. What I loved about the initial changes, and I've started maybe 10, including an online one since then, is that when you share from this deep place, I'm going to get tears about this myself, maybe, people become touched and moved by what's happening between them as the sharing pair, or it can happen in a small group. And for me, this is an experience of empathic bonding. People fall in love with each other, and I don't want to call it emotional contagion either. I call it agape in the Greek sense of the love that is not erotic. And what happens is you, as the listener, you feel like you are holding in your hands the total spiritual, holy uniqueness of the other person. And for me, that's the empathy that matters. And you're just moved by the beauty of that unique person. So that's what matters to me, and it's not so marketable. Although I have a huge website where I have even tried to get this idea of compassion, you could say, into businesses, where it would be so valuable if the workplace could be a place where you felt you were going to be listened to in a compassionate way. So in terms of curriculum, I have this huge website, and let's see if I can do this. How's my time? Okay. I'm really technologically backward. Okay, now I am looking at my website. What happened to other people? Are you looking at my website?
Yes, we are.
Oh, yay!
Yep.
All right, so there's my website. It is huge. It came about in part because Jenlin's Focusing Institute, to my view, has become focused upon focusing as a more contemplative practice. Although there is still focusing partnership, the emphasis was too far away from creating community for what mattered to me. So I made my website, and on it I have the Creative Edge Focusing Pyramid, 2 core skills applied in 7 methods. This is the basis of my approach, that what I'm now calling intuitive focusing and focused listening are 2 self-help skills that apply in every aspect of our living and can be thought of like reading and writing. Basic skills of human literacy that everyone should have and that pop up everywhere in your life. So in my pyramid, we have focusing alone, we have listening focusing partnerships, we have interpersonal focusing for conflict resolution, we have focusing support groups or focusing teams for innovative problem solving in both personal growth and in more creative settings like businesses. We have focusing in a decision-making model, listening and focusing for win-win decision-making. We have the concept of focusing communities, as I described, the changes group, where the basis is breaking down prejudice and stereotyping through listening focusing. We have creative edge organizations, where you do motivate people from their felt sense to get buy-in in organizations and all the things that come from that. So I just wanted to say that's important to me, the extensive application of listening focusing skills in all ranges. And I'm going to hit one more thing here and still rush into the curriculum. Under Is This You, I also have applied these in my special 7 interest areas, but the main thing is that these 2 skills apply everywhere. So they can apply in organizations, they can apply in support groups, supportive communities. These skills can be applied in education, and where I've seen that education trauma has been around ADHD, so special interest there. Positive parenting, conscious relationships, including intimacy and conflict resolution. Experiential focusing therapy, a way of deepening counseling and therapy, and also in a spiritual place. And now If I could only find it, I'd go back to the Hangout, but I don't see it. Maybe I'll just close my page. I'm scared.
It's on the left. If you just click the same screen share button before it'll undo it.
I don't see any screen share button. So I'm going to try to just close this Safari page, and here you are, and I have very little time. So you can subscribe on my website. I have a huge e-course, 3 emails a week that teach focusing, the more contemplative self-compassion. They teach active listening skills. They teach passive listening, simply not interrupting people. They teach all the different applications. So I have that, and I've been 9 months a year. I send out these 3 emails a week, and I've been doing it for about 10 years, and probably have 80 active people a year doing it. I need a much broader marketing. I have a manual for how to start supportive communities, and I have multimedia that goes with it, focusing instructions, listening focusing demonstrations. They're all now $5 downloads on my website, so that I'm trying to make it really accessible to people. I think I need, as a next step, which I have not done, is to integrate it with an online course, face-to-face course, through something like Maestro Conferencing or Google Hangouts. People are not so good at self-help. I don't know if you've noticed, but you think they're going to do it, and they don't. So I think a more interactive component demonstrating the skills is needed. And I'll stop. My vision would be that these supportive communities would be as accessible as 12-step groups throughout the world. So stopping there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kathy. We have about 9 minutes for Q&A. When I first saw your work, I was really struck in terms of what kind of my interest moved towards doing the empathic listening, the mutual empathic listening, and then the doing small groups. And when I saw your site, it was like, wow, here's somebody who in the 1970s was already doing this, already laying the groundwork, and had like the same vision, seeing the kind of the natural progression seems to be what you were already doing. And so it was like you'd already done it. You know, I don't know how many years ago that is, from the 70s. So I felt a real resonance there. Why do you feel that it hasn't like taken off more? It's like, here it is, this empathy, you know, the empathic listening, empathy circles. I guess I see the focusing as sort of a self-empathy part. Is like you're going into yourself, you're feeling into yourself. So it's part of the empathic relationship building, getting more connected to yourself and what's arising kind of in a visceral sense. And why hasn't this all taken off more? It's like, what is this, 70, 80, 90? I mean, we're talking 35, 40 years. It's like, why isn't this, having more of an impact?
So I'll say part of that, I think it's personal, and I think it's cultural. So what happened to me is I ended up with 2 children, neither of them my birth children, who had very special needs, and that led me into 20 years of trying to get them through school. And then similar issues with grandchildren. And I also was in a situation where I was not technologically moving on. I think that's partly why I'm back here, not retired, is because of what Edwin is doing. Making the Hangouts, making YouTube so immediately available. It's like I feel like I've been crying out in the wilderness because it's hard to describe what it is, and now these new ways are possible. But I saw in the Focusing Institute, when Jenlyn left our self-help group atmosphere, I thought we would keep this emphasis on community building, and it has really gone into more of a self-empathy, you could call it, direction. And that has been kind of upsetting to me, and maybe I should have somehow just gone off if I weren't being this mother grandmother. Maybe I spent too much time kind of arguing with these people about, why don't you care about groups anymore? And there's a resistance, though, to caring about other people. But I will say again that once you belong to a changes group, the people who choose to do it are so committed. They'll drive an hour just to see the beginning part of the meeting where everyone checks in and says how they're doing, even if they don't have time to stay for the exchange of listening focusing terms. And they start to do things for each other. If someone's in trouble, they'll help. If they need help moving their apartment, or somebody died and they need a ride to the airport, or casseroles. I mean, it brings back what the old small town church communities used to do. And that touches me so deeply. That is what I care about. And I think it has to do with what we say, being touched and being moved. A book that also was not so marketable. But I'm still trying. The value of tears as a moral compass, as a way of letting us know what matters and of bonding us with each other. So stop there. Anyone else? So curriculum for me is very experiential, hands-on, and not so much academic. So I'm really happy to see the academic component. And I'm pretty serious. I'm not so playful. So I was thrilled to see Schwann's games. So, Leanne.
So, Kathy, I just wanted to observe that the decades of experience and practice you hold in focusing and empathic listening are really evident, especially when you highlight for us the holding of the sacred in the other person when we are truly, authentically empathic with them. And I think that the struggles that you highlight are very real, and I'm only recently coming to think that empathy really requires us to hold two perspectives at once, ours and the other person's, and that can be a challenge. So I just wanted to thank you for sharing with us what the journey looks like after decades of practice, because I could really, really see how rewarding it is and why it's worth staying in it.
Thank you.